Cut the feed. Cut the feed. Marcus Chin's coffee exploded across the control board as he lunged for the switches. His hands flew across buttons, cables, anything. But the massive LED wall kept broadcasting. 3,000 people sat frozen in their seats. On screen, 40 feet tall, Evan Reed's face, twisted with fury, veins visible at his temples. And across from him, a woman with auburn hair, her hands frozen mid-sign, her interpreter backing away like he'd witnessed a crime. I don't care about your concerns. Evan's voice thundered through every speaker. We are 9 minutes away from the most important demo in this company's history, and you want to hold everything hostage over plastic that feels slightly different? A woman in the 5th row grabbed her colleague's arm. Oh my God, is he screaming at a deaf woman? He is. Her colleague was already filming. He absolutely is. Marcus finally found the master switch. The screen went black. The Thimble Care logo reappeared, soft music humming. But in the silence that followed, 3,000 phones were already uploading. 45 seconds earlier, Hannah Brooks had known exactly how this would go. I said a no. Her hands cut through the air, sharp, precise, final. 19 years of fighting to be heard without a voice had taught her how to fill a room with presence alone. Derek, her interpreter, spoke her words aloud, though his voice shook slightly. We are not putting uncertified parts into a live demonstration. Evan Reed stepped closer. Behind him, crew members rushed past with cables and clipboards, pretending very hard not to notice the confrontation brewing 3 feet away. Hannah. Evan's voice dropped into that reasonable tone she recognized instantly, the voice of a man convinced he was being patient. The certified shipment was delayed. These substitutes arrived this morning. They look identical. They function. They feel wrong. Derek translated before Evan could finish. Feel wrong. Evan's composure cracked at the edges. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar partnership, and you want to cancel because of how something feels. Hannah stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Most people backed away when she did this. Evan didn't, but his jaw tightened. I designed this device, she signed, each movement deliberate enough to land like punctuation. I know what the certified casing feels like against my fingers. This substitute is thinner, lighter. The thermal signature will be different. If it overheats on stage, it won't overheat. Then we lose the retailer. We lose the nonprofit grant. We lose 12,000 senior apartments. We lose everything. Her hands stilled, then moved again, slower. All because you couldn't wait for the right parts. Evan's face flushed red. The vein at his temple pulsed visibly. Do you have any idea what's riding on this demo? Yes. Do you understand that jobs, your colleagues' jobs, depend on the next 2 hours going perfectly? I understand better than you do. Then why? His voice rose past the point of control. Why are you being so difficult? The word landed between them like a slap. Hannah didn't flinch. She'd been called difficult before. By teachers who thought deaf meant stupid. By bosses who thought asking for accommodation meant asking for charity. By men who believed volume was the same as being right. She'd buried all of them professionally. I'm being precise, she signed, her movements calm while Evan's composure disintegrated. I'm being careful. I'm being exactly what you hired me to be. I hired you to make this launch work. You hired me to make it safe. Those are not the same thing. Evan's voice exploded. I don't care about your concerns. 15 seconds of your caution could cost us everything. Hannah's response was instant, her hands slicing through the charged air. Derek translated, his voice barely above a whisper. And 15 seconds of your recklessness could kill someone. Neither of them noticed the red light blinking above the backstage curtain. Neither of them saw Marcus at the control board, realizing too late that the wrong feed was live. Neither of them knew that 3,000 people had just watched everything. The silence hit Hannah first. Not her silence. The familiar quiet she'd navigated since birth. This was different. This was the silence of witnesses. Of people who'd seen something they shouldn't have. She noticed the production assistant frozen mid-step, clipboard forgotten. She noticed the crew members who'd stopped pretending to work, their eyes fixed on something beyond the curtain. She noticed Evan's expression, the anger draining away, replaced by the pale horror of a man watching his career collapse in real time. Hannah turned toward the curtain gap. The LED wall showed the Thimble Care logo now, restored and innocent. But the crowd wasn't looking at the logo. They were looking at their phones. Typing, recording, sharing. In the third row, the national retail representative was texting with the intensity of a man drafting a legal memo. In the fifth row, a woman in a nonprofit lanyard was already shaking her head slowly, visibly composing her exit. Derek appeared at Hannah's side, hands moving rapidly. The backstage camera was broadcasting. They saw everything. They heard him yelling at you. Hannah closed her eyes. She gave herself exactly 3 seconds. When she opened them again, she was already calculating. The curtain rustled. Paige Lorne swept through like a press release in human form. Chanel No. 5, perfect blowout, a smile warm enough to defrost a shareholder meeting. Oh, Hannah. Paige's manicured hand landed on Hannah's shoulder. I am so sorry you had to experience that. Evan gets passionate under pressure. We all know that. He didn't mean it personally. He adores you. Everyone does. Hannah watched Paige's lips, then glanced at Derek. She says he adores you. Derek signed. That it wasn't personal. Hannah noted how Paige had positioned herself, directly between Hannah and the stage entrance. Her body language screamed protector, but her placement said gatekeeper. Like a shield. Or like a wall. I have something that might help. Paige's brightness intensified as she gestured toward a crew member wheeling forward a plastic crate. Emergency backup components. Already checked. Already labeled. Ready to swap in. We run the demo. Handle the PR mess afterward. Clean slate. Yes. The crate was already open. The parts were already arranged. The labels were already printed. Almost as if they'd been waiting, Hannah thought. For exactly this moment. She stepped forward and lifted one of the device housings. Smooth. Correct color. Perfect shape. But wrong. Too thin. Too slick. Almost oily. The weight was off by grams. Imperceptible to most people. Obvious to someone who'd spent 2 years designing every millimeter. Hannah set it down carefully. Her hands moved toward Marcus, who'd appeared beside her, still pale from the control board disaster. This isn't our material, she signed, keeping the movements small. Private. Marcus's eyes widened. Paige's smile never dimmed. Everything okay? Need the backup lighting kit too. Hannah looked at Evan, frozen by the curtain, calculating how to salvage the wreckage of the last 15 seconds. She looked at Paige, whose warmth felt suddenly artificial. Maintained. Temperature controlled. She looked at the crate of parts that shouldn't exist. The demo was supposed to start in 3 minutes. 3,000 people had just watched her humiliation, and someone had switched that camera feed on purpose. Hannah straightened her spine and walked toward the stage. Behind her, the WarmGuard hub flickered to life on its pedestal. Red. 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 Error. Stop her. Now. Melissa Thornton's heels cracked against the concrete as she intercepted Hannah 3 feet from the stage entrance. The PR director's smile was stretched so tight it looked painful. Hannah, sweetheart. Melissa's hand closed around Hannah's elbow, firm, urgent, the grip of someone used to steering people like furniture. We need to regroup. Let Evan open the demo, smooth things over, and then we'll bring you in for the technical bits. Low profile. Supporting role. Derek's hands flew, translating. Hannah looked down at Melissa's grip, then back up at her face. She didn't move. She didn't pull away. She simply waited. The grip loosened. I built WarmGuard. Hannah signed, her movements unhurried despite the chaos bleeding through from the crowd. I created beacon mode. I am the lead designer. I will not disappear because your CEO lost control of his temper. Derek's voice carried her words like a blade wrapped in silk. Melissa's smile flickered. I understand you're upset. Anyone would be. But having you front and center right now, it looks confrontational. It looks like we're rubbing salt in the wound. It looks like accountability. Hannah, move me off this stage. Hannah signed, stepping close enough that Melissa had to tilt her chin up to maintain eye contact. And I walk out of this expo entirely. Then you can explain to 3,000 people why your lead designer left after being publicly humiliated by her own CEO. Melissa's jaw worked silently. Behind her, a production assistant whispered urgently into a headset. The crowd noise was building, restless, hungry, waiting for blood or redemption. 2 minutes to demo, someone called. Melissa stepped aside. Evan appeared at the stage edge like a man walking to his own sentencing. The makeup team had performed emergency surgery. The flush was gone, the sweat patted away, every hair restored to executive perfection. He looked calm, polished, ready for cameras. He looked like a lie. Hannah watched him approach the demo pedestal from the opposite side. The WarmGuard hub sat between them, its error lights now dark, its surface gleaming under the expo spots. Hannah. His voice was pitched for the microphones. Warm, humble, designed to carry to the back rows. Before we begin, I need to address what everyone just witnessed. The crowd leaned forward. I lost my temper backstage. I raised my voice. I was disrespectful to someone who deserves nothing but respect. Evan paused, letting the silence breathe. I was wrong. Hannah watched his lips, then glanced at Derek. He says he was wrong. Derek signed. She waited. Evan continued, working the crowd now, his CEO performance fully engaged. In high-pressure moments, I sometimes forget that leadership means listening. Hannah Brooks is the reason WarmGuard exists. Her vision, her expertise, her commitment to accessibility. I failed to honor that backstage, and I'm asking for her forgiveness, and yours. Polite applause scattered through the audience, uncertain, willing to be convinced. Hannah remained still. Evan turned to her, extending his hand. The gesture was perfect. Humble. Camera ready. Hannah, can we start fresh? She recognized this moment. She'd lived through it before. The public apology that cost nothing. The handshake designed for photographers. The redemption arc that looked good in press releases but changed nothing behind closed doors. Hannah stepped forward, not to take his hand, but to face him directly. If you want my forgiveness, she signed, her movements large enough for the crowd to register their weight. Then earn it. Not with a speech. With consistent respect. Starting now. Derek translated, his voice carrying across the silent hall. Evan's composure flickered. Something moved behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or something closer to shame. He lowered his hand. Fair enough, he said quietly. The demo began. Hannah walked the crowd through WarmGuard's core features. The smart stove knob with its temperature detection, the countertop hub with its light patterns and vibration alerts, the entire philosophy built around seniors and accessibility users. The app was supposed to sync on command. It didn't. The pairing screen froze. Crashed. Displayed an error code Hannah had never seen in 2 years of development. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. From the stage edge, Paige Lorne materialized with her tablet, her expression painted with manufactured concern. Technical difficulties, she announced to the nearby journalists, her voice carrying just far enough to be overheard. You know how these things go with specialized equipment. All those extra accessibility features, they had so much complexity. Derek caught it first. His hands moved urgently at Hannah's peripheral vision. She's blaming accessibility features, he signed, saying they complicate things. Hannah's hands tightened at her sides. There it is, she thought. The knife wrapped in a compliment. She turned back to the hub, forcing herself to focus. The app was dead. The captions on the LED wall were lagging by 3 full sentences. The crowd was shifting, restless, smelling failure. She had maybe 60 seconds before everything collapsed. Think. What do you have that works without the app? Beacon mode. The offline demonstration mode she'd designed for exactly this. Power outages, connectivity failures, seniors who didn't trust smartphones. Light patterns and vibration cues only. No app required. She'd tested it 100 times in her workshop. She'd never activated it in front of 3,000 people. Hannah reached beneath the hub's sleek exterior, finding the manual controls from muscle memory. 3 taps. Hold. 2 taps. The lights shifted from dead black to soft amber. Beacon mode active. Evan watched from the stage edge, his prepared remarks forgotten in his hand. The app had crashed. The captions were failing. The crowd was circling like sharks. And Hannah wasn't panicking. She was adapting. Her hands guided the demonstration through visual cues alone, pointing to light patterns, using the silence as rhythm instead of obstacle. When the captions lagged, she simply paused, letting the gap become a feature instead of a failure. Look, her demonstration said without words. This works when everything else fails. This works for people like me. Something uncomfortable shifted in Evan's chest. He'd hired her 3 years ago because her portfolio was undeniable. He'd promoted her because she delivered results. But he'd never actually watched her, not under pressure, not when everything was falling apart around her. She was extraordinary. And 40 minutes ago, he'd screamed at her like she was the problem. The shame climbed up his throat, hot and unfamiliar. During the segment break, Evan found her near the equipment table, adjusting settings on the backup hub. Can I help? He felt stupid even asking. Hannah glanced at Derek, who translated, then looked back at Evan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Do you know sign language? She signed. No. He paused. But I want to learn. Basic signs, at least. Enough to communicate directly. If you'd teach me. The words were out before he'd thought them through. Hannah studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Sincerity, maybe. Or the lack of it. We'll see. She signed finally. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't a door closing either. Marcus appeared at Hannah's side, pale and trembling, before she could respond further. Hannah. His voice was barely a whisper. I need to tell you something. She turned to face him fully. The camera feed earlier, Marcus signed, clumsy, imperfect, but understandable. Someone told me to hide something before it happened. A shipping label. On the backstage camera. They didn't want it seen. Hannah's eyes narrowed. Who? Marcus didn't speak. He just glanced toward the stage's edge. Paige stood there, laughing with a cluster of journalists, her hand resting casually on a reporter's arm. Charming. Warm. Beloved. Hannah looked at Paige. Paige looked back. For just a moment, half a second, the warmth vanished. Something cold and calculating flickered beneath it, like teeth behind a smile. Then it was gone. Interesting. Hannah signed, her face perfectly neutral. The demo's second segment was about to begin, and Hannah was starting to realize that the real threat wasn't on stage. It was standing right behind her. We're live in 30 seconds. The production assistant's voice cracked with panic. On stage, the LED wall flickered twice, a warning sign Hannah had learned to dread. She stood at the demo pedestal, the WarmGuard hub glowing amber beneath her fingertips. Beacon mode was holding. The crowd had settled during the break, their phones temporarily lowered, their attention cautiously returning. But Hannah could feel something wrong in the air. The same instinct that told her when a design was flawed, when a material wasn't right, when someone was lying. Something was about to break. 15 seconds. Evan appeared at her side, closer than he'd stood before. Hannah, whatever happens out there, I've got your back. She glanced at Derek, who translated. We'll see. She signed, the same words she'd given him earlier. But something in his expression had shifted. Less performance. More presence. 10 seconds. The lights blazed. The crowd noise swelled. The LED wall burst to life with the ThimbleCare logo. Hannah stepped forward into the spotlight. Welcome back to the WarmGuard demonstration. Derek's voice carried her signed words across the hall, steady and professional. Hannah moved through the opening sequence with practiced precision, activating the stove knob sensor, triggering the countertop hub's light patterns, showing how the vibration alerts could warn users without requiring sound. The crowd was engaged. The retail representative in the third row had stopped texting. The nonprofit director was nodding slowly. This might actually work, Hannah allowed herself to think. Then the app crashed again. Not just froze this time, completely died. The tablet screen went black. The hub's connection indicator flickered from green to red to nothing. And the LED wall caption stopped entirely. Gasps rippled through the audience. Hannah felt the shift immediately, the crowd's attention fragmenting, whispers spreading like cracks in ice. She glanced at Derek, who looked pale. Captions are gone, he signed rapidly. The backup system isn't responding either. From the stage edge, Paige's voice floated toward the press section, pitched perfectly for accidental overhearing. This is exactly what I warned them about, she sighed, shaking her head with theatrical sympathy. When you design for such specialized needs, you add layers of complexity that mainstream systems can't support. It's admirable, really, but perhaps not practical for a live environment. A journalist nodded, typing notes. Hannah's jaw tightened. She's not just undermining the demo, Hannah realized. She's undermining me, making my accessibility features sound like the problem. The crowd was getting restless. Someone in the back stood up, heading for the exit. 60 seconds. Maybe less. Hannah made a decision. She walked to the edge of the stage and held up both hands. The movement was deliberate, commanding without aggression, confident without arrogance. A few people stopped mid-whisper. Then a few more. Within 10 seconds, the hall was silent. Hannah turned to Derek and signed slowly, clearly, making each movement large enough for the entire crowd to see. The technology failed, but the design didn't. Derek translated, his voice carrying across the hushed space. Hannah walked back to the hub and pressed the manual override, the same sequence she'd used earlier. 3 taps. Hold. 2 taps. The device hummed to life, its amber lights pulsing in the familiar beacon mode pattern. Then she did something unexpected. She reached over to the main audio board and turned the stage speakers down. All the way down. Silence fell, complete, intentional, deafening. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Hannah smiled. And she began demonstrating WarmGuard the way she experienced it every day, without sound, without an app, without anything except the elegant visual and tactile language she designed from the beginning. The hub's lights pulsed in slow, rhythmic patterns. Green for safe, amber for attention, red for danger. Each transition was smooth, intuitive, impossible to miss. She pressed the vibration alert, holding the device up so the crowd could see the gentle pulse against her palm. She walked them through a simulated cooking scenario, turning the stove knob, watching the hub respond with light cues, feeling the vibration warning when the temperature climbed too high. No app, no sound, no captions, just design so elegant it spoke for itself. In the third row, the retail representative lowered his phone. He wasn't texting anymore. He was watching. The nonprofit director leaned forward, her skepticism visibly melting into something closer to wonder. And in the back corner, an elderly man with silver hair and calloused hands, Mr. Al Garcia, according to his volunteer badge, nodded slowly, his eyes bright with recognition. He'd spent 40 years as a firefighter. He'd seen every kitchen disaster imaginable, and he'd never seen a safety device that communicated this clearly, this simply, this beautifully. Evan watched from the wings, his prepared remarks crumpled and forgotten in his pocket. The app had died. The captions had failed. The LED wall was displaying nothing but a static logo. And Hannah was winning anyway. She'd turned the disaster into a demonstration of exactly why WarmGuard mattered. Look, her performance said without words. When everything else fails, this still works. For seniors. For deaf users. For anyone who needs safety without complexity. The crowd was captivated. Evan felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't expected. Not just admiration. Not just respect. Attraction. He pushed it down immediately. This wasn't the time. This wasn't appropriate. He'd humiliated her publicly less than an hour ago. But he couldn't stop watching. The way she commanded the stage. The way she refused to shrink. The way she turned every obstacle into proof of her own brilliance. When did I become the obstacle? He wondered. The thought stung more than he wanted to admit. During the transition to the Q&A segment, Evan found himself gravitating toward the ASL interpreter station where a laminated card showed basic signs. Hello. Thank you. Sorry. Help. He practiced them clumsily, his fingers refusing to cooperate. Marcus passed by, saw what he was doing, and let out a snort of surprised laughter. Your thank you looks like you're swatting a fly, Marcus said. Show me the right way. Marcus hesitated, then demonstrated. Evan tried again. Closer. Still awkward. Why are you doing this? Marcus asked. Evan watched Hannah across the stage, her hands moving in fluid conversation with a journalist who'd brought their own interpreter. Because I should have learned years ago, he said quietly. The Q&A was wrapping up when Mr. Al Garcia approached the demo pedestal. He moved slowly, deliberately, the careful gait of a man who'd learned that rushing caused accidents. His volunteer badge identified him as a senior housing liaison, but his bearings said something more. Military, maybe. Or first responder. May I? He gestured toward the WarmGuard hub. Hannah nodded, stepping back to give him space. Mr. Garcia picked up the device, turning it over in weathered hands. He pressed the stove knob, watching the lights respond. He felt the vibration pattern against his palm. Then he looked up at Hannah with sharp, knowing eyes. The casing, he said slowly, loudly enough for her to lip read. This feels different from the display model I saw earlier. Hannah went still. Derek translated, but she'd already understood. Different how, she signed. Mr. Garcia frowned, running his thumb along the device's edge. Thinner. And it's warming up faster than it should. Not dangerous, not yet, but faster than good engineering would allow. He met her eyes directly. Someone cut corners, young lady. And I think you already know that. Hannah looked at the casing in Mr. Garcia's hands. Then she looked at the backup crate Paige had provided, still sitting at the edge of the stage, its contents gleaming under the expo lights. Then she looked at Paige herself, who was laughing with a board member near the exit, her posture relaxed, her smile radiant. She's not worried, Hannah realized. She should be worried. But she's not. Which meant Paige already knew something Hannah didn't. Thank you. Hannah signed to Mr. Garcia. Can you stay close? I may need a witness. The old firefighter's eyes crinkled with something like approval. Sweetheart, he said, I've been waiting 40 years to watch someone hold the right people accountable. I'm not going anywhere. We need to talk. Now. Evan's voice was low, urgent, cutting through the backstage chaos like a blade. He grabbed Hannah's arm, then immediately released it, remembering. Sorry. I'm sorry. He held up both hands, stepping back. But we have a serious problem. Hannah raised an eyebrow, waiting. Derek materialized beside her, already translating. The board just called an emergency session. Evan continued, his voice tight. They want someone to take the fall for the camera incident. Someone visible. Someone they can sacrifice to the press. Hannah's expression didn't change, but her hands moved sharply. Let me guess. They want it to be me. Evan's jaw tightened. Gerald Whitmore suggested that your communication requirements created the backstage tension. That if we'd had a standard lead designer, the argument wouldn't have happened. That the optics would be cleaner if you blamed the deaf woman. Hannah's signs were crisp, precise, deadly calm. How convenient. I'm not doing it. The words came out fast, fierce, almost desperate. Hannah studied his face. She'd heard promises before. Empty ones. Hollow ones. Words designed to buy time until the knife could find her back. The board wants a scapegoat, she signed slowly. You're the CEO? You could give them one with a single phone call. Why wouldn't you? Evan ran a hand through his hair, destroying an hour of careful styling. Because it would be wrong. Because you didn't cause this, I did. Because. He stopped, struggling for words. Because you're the only person in this company who told me the truth today, he finished quietly. And I almost destroyed you for it. The conference room smelled like cold coffee and panic. Gerald Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his silver hair immaculate, his expression carved from corporate granite. 3 other board members flanked him. 2 men in matching navy suits. 1 woman with a tablet full of damaged projections. Paige stood near the window, her posture relaxed, her smile sympathetic. The perfect picture of an ally waiting to help. Evan. Gerald's voice was smooth, controlled. We've reviewed the footage. The situation is salvageable, but we need decisive action. Agreed. Evan remained standing. Which is why I'm here. Good. Gerald slid a folder across the table. Legal has drafted a statement. We acknowledge the backstage miscommunication, emphasize our commitment to inclusive workplace practices, and announce that the employee involved has been reassigned to a less public-facing role. Evan didn't touch the folder. Which employee? Gerald's smile thinned. I think we both know the answer to that. Say her name. The room went cold. Excuse me. If you're going to fire someone, Gerald, at least have the courage to say her name. Evan's voice hardened. Hannah Brooks. Lead designer. The person who built the product we're all here to sell. The person I yelled at on camera because I was too arrogant to listen. Say her name. Gerald's composure cracked, just slightly. Evan, this is business. The retail partnership is watching right now to see what kind of company we are. Evan leaned forward, palms flat on the table. And if we throw our deaf lead designer under the bus to protect my ego, they'll know exactly what kind of company we are. Paige stepped forward, her voice gentle. Evan, no one's suggesting we throw anyone under the bus. We're just talking about optics. A temporary reassignment. A cooling-off period. Hannah would understand. She's a professional. Hannah is in the hallway. Evan said flatly. Waiting to see if this company is worth her loyalty. And I'm about to give her the answer. He walked out without waiting for a response. Hannah was leaning against the wall outside, arms crossed, Derek beside her. Her expression was unreadable, the careful blankness of someone who'd learned to hide her feelings in hostile environments. They wanted to reassign you, Evan said directly, knowing Derek would translate. To take you off the project. To make you invisible so the story would go away. Hannah's hands moved. And I told them no. She waited. I told them if anyone takes the fall, it's me. I'm the one who lost my temper. I'm the one who created this mess. And I'm the one who's going to fix it. Evan took a breath. Starting with this. He pulled out his phone and opened the expo speaker schedule. The influencer segment page arranged for this afternoon, the one with the lifestyle blogger and the celebrity chef endorsement. It was supposed to be our big viral moment. Maximum exposure. Maximum press. Hannah nodded slowly. She knew about the segment. Everyone did. Paige had been bragging about it for weeks. I'm canceling it. Hannah's eyebrows rose. Instead, Evan continued. I'm giving that time slot to you. Full stage. Full control. You demo WarmGuard however you want. You show them beacon mode, accessibility features, everything you've built. And I'll be in the audience, watching. Not presenting. Not taking credit. Just watching. Derek's voice translated the words, but Hannah was already reading Evan's lips, his body language, the tension in his shoulders. He was terrified. This was career suicide if it went wrong. And he was doing it anyway. Why? She signed. Evan met her eyes. Because 3 hours ago, I was the villain in this story. And I don't want to be the villain anymore. I want to be someone who deserves to work with people like you. The announcement hit the expo floor like a bomb. Change of schedule. The PA system crackled. The 3 o'clock influencer segment has been canceled. In its place, ThimbleCare's lead designer, Hannah Brooks, will present an extended demonstration of WarmGuard's accessibility features. All attendees welcome. Paige's smile vanished. She found Evan near the coffee station, her composure cracking for the first time all day. What are you doing? Her voice was low, venomous. That segment took me 4 months to arrange. The blogger has 2 million followers. The chef was going to. Going to what? Evan turned to face her. Talk about products he's never used? Smile for cameras while knowing nothing about what we actually built? I'm done with that, Paige. We're selling a safety device, not a lifestyle brand. You're committing professional suicide. Maybe. Evan shrugged. But at least I'll be able to live with myself. Paige's eyes narrowed, a flash of something cold and calculating beneath the charm. The board won't forget this, Evan. Gerald won't forget this. And neither will I. Good. Evan picked up his coffee. I'm counting on it. Hannah watched the exchange from across the room. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read the tension. The way Paige's posture shifted from pleading to threatening. The way Evan's shoulders squared, refusing to bend. Marcus appeared at her side, tablet in hand. You need to see this, he signed, his movements clumsy but urgent. I found the shipping records. The substitute parts, the ones Paige provided, they came from a company called Lorne Industrial Supply. Hannah's blood went cold. Lorne, Paige's maiden name, Marcus confirmed. And there's more. The order was placed 3 weeks ago, before the original shipment was delayed. Someone knew we'd need backup parts before there was any reason to need them. Hannah looked at Paige, still arguing with Evan near the coffee station. Then she looked at the backup crate, still sitting at the edge of the demo stage. This wasn't a coincidence, she realized. This was a plan. The delayed shipment. The substitute parts. Maybe even the camera feed. Someone had orchestrated this entire disaster. And Paige was standing in the middle of it, smiling. Mr. Al Garcia appeared beside Hannah, his weathered hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea. You've got that look, he said, loudly enough for her to lip read. The look my rookie firefighters used to get when they realized a fire wasn't an accident. Hannah nodded slowly. What do you need? Mr. Garcia asked. Hannah's hands moved, and Derek translated. I need someone with credibility. Someone the crowd will trust. Someone who can look at these substitute parts and say, on the record, that something's wrong. Mr. Garcia smiled, the slow, satisfied smile of a man who'd spent his life waiting to be useful. Young lady, he said, I've been inspecting safety equipment since before you were born. Point me at whatever you need, and I'll tell the truth so loud they'll hear it in the parking lot. Hannah felt something shift in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close. The system's crashing again. Marcus's voice cut through the backstage chaos like a fire alarm. His fingers flew across the control board, but every fix spawned 2 new problems. Hannah stood at the stage entrance, watching the LED wall flicker and stutter. The 3 o'clock time slot, her time slot, was 60 seconds away, and everything was falling apart. The app won't sync. Derek translated Marcus's frantic updates. The backup server is down. The captions are running on emergency power. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the whole system goes dark. Evan appeared beside her, his face pale. Can we delay? By some time. The retailer leaves at 4. Hannah signed, her movements sharp. The nonprofit director is already packing her bag. We delay, we lose them both. Then what do we do? Hannah looked at the stage, at the flickering lights, at the crowd shifting restlessly in their seats, patience wearing thin. Then she looked at the WarmGuard hub in her hands. Solid, reliable, designed to work when everything else failed. "We do it my way," she signed. "No app, no captions, no sound." Evan stared at her. "You want to run a live demo in complete silence. I want to show them what this product actually does." Hannah's eyes met his directly. "I want to show them that safety doesn't require perfect conditions. It requires perfect design." Paige materialized from nowhere, her arms full of replacement equipment. "Thank goodness I prepared for this." Her voice was warm, concerned, perfectly calibrated for the nearby journalists. "I've got backup units right here, already tested, already synced. We can swap them in and save the whole presentation." She held out a sleek device housing, identical to the others. Hannah didn't take it. "These are the same parts from earlier," she signed, her movements visible to everyone watching. "The ones with the wrong thermal signature. The ones that warm up too fast." Paige's smile flickered. "Hannah, I don't know what you're talking about. These are certified thimble care components. I checked them myself." "Then you won't mind if someone else checks them too." The words landed like a challenge. Paige's composure held, barely. "Of course not. But we really don't have time for." "We'll make time." Hannah turned to the crowd and raised her hands. The movement was commanding, the same gesture she'd used earlier to silence the room. Conversations died. Phones lowered. 3,000 pairs of eyes focused on the woman standing alone at the edge of the stage. "There's been a lot of talk today about accessibility," Derek translated as Hannah's hands moved in fluid, deliberate signs. "About special requirements. About how designing for people like me makes things complicated." She paused, letting the words settle. "I'm going to show you the opposite." Hannah walked to the audio board and turned every speaker down to 0. The silence was absolute. Uncomfortable. Almost oppressive. Then she activated beacon mode. The WarmGuard hub came alive with light. Soft amber pulses that rippled outward like a heartbeat. No sound. No app. No complicated interface. Just light. Just vibration. Just communication stripped down to its purest form. Hannah began the demonstration. She moved through a simulated cooking scenario, turning the smart stove knob, watching the hub respond with color changes, feeling the vibration alerts against her palm. Each transition was smooth, intuitive, impossible to miss. She gestured for an audience volunteer. A woman in the front row stood hesitantly, a grandmother type, silver-haired, reading glasses perched on her nose. She approached the stage like she was walking into a job interview. Hannah handed her the stove knob. "Turn it," she signed, miming the motion. The woman turned the knob. The hub flashed green, safe. She turned it further. Amber, attention. Further still. Red, danger. A gentle vibration pulsed through the device. The woman's eyes widened. "I felt that," she breathed. "Without looking. Without hearing anything. I felt it." The crowd leaned forward. Mr. Al Garcia stood from his seat in the 4th row. "May I?" His voice carried across the silent hall. Rough, authoritative, impossible to ignore. Hannah nodded. The retired firefighter walked to the stage with the deliberate pace of a man who'd seen everything and feared nothing. He picked up the WarmGuard hub, turned it over in his weathered hands, tested the weight and balance. Then he looked out at the crowd. "I spent 40 years responding to kitchen fires," he said. "Do you know what causes most of them? Forgotten stoves. Unattended burners. Seniors who can't hear the timer. People who fall asleep while cooking." He held up the hub. "In 40 years, I've never seen a device that communicates this clearly. That works without sound, without apps, without anything except good design." He paused. "This isn't a product for special needs. This is a product for everyone's needs. And it's the first one I've seen that respects how real people actually live." Applause started in the back, tentative at first, then building. The nonprofit director was nodding. The retail representative had put down his phone entirely. Hannah allowed herself a small breath of relief. Then she saw Paige's face, and she knew it wasn't over yet. "One more thing," Hannah signed, her movements large enough for the entire crowd to see. Derek's voice carried her words. "There's been some confusion today about equipment, about substitute parts that were provided at the last minute. I'd like to clear that up." Paige's smile froze. "Is there an independent safety inspector in the building?" Hannah signed. "Someone not affiliated with Thimble Care?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Near the expo registration desk, a man in a gray jacket raised his hand. Martin Cho, according to his badge. Third-party compliance verification. Present for exactly this kind of situation. Would you be willing to examine these components? Hannah gestured toward Paige's backup crate. On camera? Right now. Martin Cho was already walking toward the stage. Paige stepped forward, her voice tight. This is ridiculous. We're in the middle of a presentation. We can't just. We absolutely can, Evan interrupted. He'd appeared at the stage edge, his expression unreadable. In fact, I'm requesting it. As CEO, if there's any question about our component quality, I want it answered publicly. Paige's eyes flashed, a moment of pure, unfiltered fury. Then the mask slid back into place. Of course, she said smoothly. I have nothing to hide. Martin Cho examined the components with methodical precision. He checked the housing weight. He measured the wall thickness. He ran a thermal conductivity test using a portable device from his inspection kit. The crowd watched in complete silence. After 3 minutes, he looked up. These casings are not consistent with ThimbleCare's published specifications, he announced. The material is thinner, approximately 18% below the certified standard. The thermal conductivity is significantly higher than safety parameters allow. Hannah signed the question everyone was thinking. What does that mean in practice? It means under sustained use, these devices could overheat. Martin Cho's voice was matter-of-fact, professional. Not immediately, not dramatically, but faster than the certified design. For a product marketed to seniors, many of whom have reduced heat sensitivity in their hands, this could be dangerous. Gasps scattered through the audience. Where did these components come from? Evan asked, his voice hard. Martin Cho checked the shipping label on the crate. Lorne Industrial Supply, he read aloud. Ordered 3 weeks ago. Authorized by, he squinted at the signature. P. Lorne, Partnerships Department. Every head in the room turned toward Paige. Her smile finally, completely cracked. This is a misunderstanding. Paige's voice was higher now, stripped of its careful modulation. I was trying to help. The original shipment was delayed. I found a backup supplier to save the launch. I didn't know the specs were different. The order was placed 3 weeks ago. Hannah signed, Derek translating. Before the original shipment was delayed. How did you know we'd need backup parts before there was any reason to need them? Silence. And Lorne Industrial Supply. Hannah's hands moved slowly, deliberately. That's your family's company. Your cousin's business. The same cousin who was recently investigated for providing substandard materials to 3 other tech firms. The color drained from Paige's face. You set this up, Hannah continued. The delayed shipment. The substitute parts. Probably even the camera feed. To create chaos. To make yourself look like the hero. To skim money through your cousin's company while everyone was too distracted to notice. That's insane. You can't prove. I don't have to prove it, Hannah signed. The inspector just did. Paige looked around the room, at the journalists typing furiously, at the board members whispering urgently, at Evan's face carved from ice. She had no allies left. This isn't over, she hissed. Then she turned and walked off the stage, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. The crowd erupted. Applause. Cheers. The nonprofit director was standing. The retail representative was shaking his head in amazement. Hannah stood at the center of the stage, the WarmGuard hub glowing amber in her hands, and allowed herself one small, private smile. She'd walked into this expo expecting to be humiliated. She'd walked out having exposed a fraud. And somewhere in the chaos, she noticed Evan watching her from the wings, not with the polished CO mask, but with something rawer, something that looked almost like wonder. Don't get used to that look, she told herself. But she didn't look away. She's gone. Marcus delivered the news 3 days after the expo, standing in the doorway of Hannah's workshop with a tablet clutched to his chest. Hannah looked up from her workbench, where a new WarmGuard prototype sat in pieces. Paige. Resigned this morning. Officially pursuing other opportunities. Unofficially, Marcus made a gesture like an explosion. The board gave her 2 choices, resign quietly or face a full investigation. Her cousin's company is already under federal review. Turns out we weren't the only client getting substandard parts. Hannah set down her soldering iron. She should have felt satisfaction. Victory. Something. Instead, she just felt tired. What about the grant? She signed. The retailer? Marcus's face split into an enormous grin. That's why I'm here. He turned the tablet around, showing a press release draft on the screen. ThimbleCare secures National Retail Partnership and Nonprofit Grant for WarmGuard Senior Safety Initiative. 12,000 units to be distributed across 6 states. Hannah read it twice. Then she read it a third time, just to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. The nonprofit director called yesterday. Marcus signed. His movements clumsy but improving daily. She said Mr. Garcia's endorsement sealed it. A retired firefighter with 40 years of experience, vouching for the product on camera? That's worth more than any influencer campaign. Hannah laughed, a silent exhale that shook her shoulders. They'd done it. Against sabotage, humiliation, and a system designed to make her invisible, they'd actually done it. Evan found her on the rooftop garden that evening. ThimbleCare's Minneapolis headquarters had a small green space on the 8th floor, a patch of native wildflowers and wooden benches that most employees forgot existed. Hannah had discovered it during her first week, when she needed somewhere quiet to think. She hadn't expected anyone else to know about it. "I'm not stalking you," Evan said quickly, hands raised. "Derek told me you come up here sometimes. I can leave if." Hannah shook her head and gestured to the bench beside her. He sat, carefully, leaving appropriate distance between them. The Minneapolis skyline glittered in the fading light. Somewhere below, rush hour traffic crawled silently, silent to her, anyway. "I've been practicing," Evan said. He raised his hands and signed, slowly and clumsily. "Thank you. For everything." His finger positioning was wrong. His movement was choppy. It was, objectively, terrible sign language. It was also the most genuine thing she'd seen him do since they met. "Your everything looks like elephant," Hannah signed back, letting Derek, who'd apparently followed Evan up, translate. Evan groaned. "I've been practicing for 3 days." "Practice more." But she was smiling. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The kind of silence that didn't need filling. The kind that felt like a conversation all its own. Finally, Evan spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said. At the demo. About earning forgiveness through consistent respect." Hannah turned to look at him. "I talked to the board yesterday," he continued. "About restructuring. About what ThimbleCare needs to be if we're actually going to serve the people we claim to serve." Derek translated, though Hannah was already reading Evan's lips, catching most of it directly. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day product decisions. Creating a new position, Chief Accessibility Officer. Full authority over safety standards, design review, and accommodation policies." Evan paused. "I want you to take it." Hannah's hands stilled. "It's not a gift," Evan added quickly. "It's not me trying to buy my way out of guilt. You're the most qualified person in this company. You proved that on stage in front of 3,000 people." The board agreed unanimously. "Even Gerald Whitmore?" Evan's smile was grim. "Gerald is pursuing other opportunities too. Turns out he had some interesting financial connections to Paige's cousin's company. The federal investigators were very interested." Hannah absorbed this information. 2 board members gone. A new executive position. A fundamental shift in how the company operated. 3 days ago, they'd tried to make her invisible. Now they were offering her a seat at the table. "I need to think about it," she signed. Evan nodded. "Take all the time you need." A week passed. Hannah threw herself into the WarmGuard rollout, coordinating with the nonprofit, training the retail staff, refining beacon mode based on feedback from the first senior housing pilots. Mr. Al Garcia became an unofficial ambassador, visiting apartment complexes across Minnesota to demonstrate the device himself. His endorsement carried weight that no marketing campaign could match. "You've got a gift, young lady," he told Hannah during one of their planning sessions, speaking slowly so she could lip read. "Not just for design. For making people feel seen. That's rarer than you know." She thought about that comment often. About what it meant to be seen. To be valued. To be treated as essential rather than accommodated. And she thought about Evan. He kept his distance. No grand gestures. No flowers or gifts or performative apologies. Just consistency. He showed up to accessibility planning meetings, listened more than he spoke. He took sign language lessons 3 times a week, improving slowly but visibly. He advocated for closed captioning at every company event, not because Hannah asked, but because he'd finally started noticing its absence. Small things. Daily things. The kind of things that couldn't be faked over time. Hannah watched, and waited, and felt something shifting inside her that she wasn't ready to name. 3 weeks after the expo, she found him in the rooftop garden again. He was practicing signs alone, hands moving through vocabulary drills with the concentration of a student before a final exam. He didn't see her approach. "Hello. My name is Evan. I am learning. Please be patient." His movements were still imperfect, but they were better. Much better. Hannah stepped into his field of vision. He startled, then flushed with embarrassment. "How long were you watching?" "Long enough," she signed. Silence. Then Evan took a breath and signed, slowly but clearly. "I like you. Not because of guilt. Because of who you are. I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I'm trying." Hannah studied his face. She'd been here before, with men who said the right things, performed the right contrition, then slid back into old patterns the moment the pressure eased. But Evan had been tested. Publicly, privately, professionally. And every time, he'd chosen differently than she expected. "You humiliated me," she signed. "In front of 3,000 people. Do you understand what that felt like?" "No," Evan admitted. "I can't fully understand. But I know it was wrong. And I know that one apology, or 100 apologies, doesn't erase it. All I can do is show you, day after day, that I'm not that person anymore. What if it takes years? Then it takes years. What if I never trust you completely? Then I'll spend whatever time you give me being worthy of whatever trust you can offer." Hannah let the silence stretch. The Minneapolis skyline glittered. The wildflowers swayed. Somewhere far below, the world kept moving, indifferent to the small, terrifying thing happening on this rooftop. Finally, she signed, "Ask me again. In 6 months. And keep practicing your sign language. Your trust still looks like cheese." Evan laughed, surprised, relieved, almost giddy. 6 months, he repeated. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. 6 months later, the WarmGuard National Launch event filled the convention center in St. Paul. Hannah stood at the center of the stage, the new Chief Accessibility Officer badge gleaming on her lapel. Behind her, an LED wall displayed testimonials from seniors across 6 states, grandmothers cooking safely in their kitchens, veterans living independently, families sleeping better knowing their loved ones were protected. The audience was twice the size of the original expo. National press, industry leaders, a congressional representative who'd championed accessibility legislation for 20 years. Hannah delivered the keynote in American Sign Language, with live interpretation for the hearing audience. It was the first time in the company's history that the primary presentation language wasn't spoken English. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, in the quiet of the green room, Evan found her. His sign language was fluid now. Not perfect, he'd probably never achieve native fluency, but genuine. Practiced. Earned. 6 months, he signed. "I'm asking again. Dinner. Just us. No work talk. No agenda. Just getting to know each other. Properly." Hannah looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the man who'd screamed at her backstage 18 months ago. The man who'd chosen her dignity over his image. The man who'd shown up, day after day, learning her language, fighting for her seat at the table, never once asking for credit. People could change. Not everyone. Not easily. Not without proof. But sometimes, rarely, they could. "One dinner," she signed back. "And you're paying. CEO salary." Evan's smile lit up his entire face. They walked out of the convention center together. The Minnesota winter had softened into early spring. Ice melting, wildflowers pushing through the thaw, the world slowly warming back to life. Hannah felt it too. That warming. That slow, careful thaw. She wasn't naive. She knew relationships required work, that trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick, that the scars from public humiliation didn't vanish just because someone apologized. But she also knew this. She had walked into that expo expecting to be erased. Instead, she had become undeniable. The WarmGuard hub in her bag pulsed with soft amber light, beacon mode, active and ready, designed to work when everything else failed. Just like her. 1 year later, Hannah and Evan stood on the rooftop garden where everything had truly begun, not as CEO and employee, but as partners in every sense. The wildflowers bloomed around them as Hannah signed the words she'd finally decided she was ready to say. "Yes, but you're still practicing that sign language. Your forever looks like breakfast." Evan laughed, pulled her close, and signed back with imperfect, earnest hands. "Then I'll keep practicing. For as long as you'll let me." Below them, the city hummed with ordinary life. Above them, the stars emerged slowly, one by one, like possibilities waiting to be claimed. Hannah Brooks had been underestimated her entire life. She'd learned to make that everyone else's problem. And now, finally, she'd found someone willing to rise to meet her, not because she needed saving, but because she deserved to be chosen. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and bright. She couldn't wait to build it.